The sun was shining, but the air was cold. People were busy walking on the street. Cars passed by, children laughed. But one woman moved slowly, quietly, and alone. Her name was Mrs. Layla. She was old, maybe 65 or 70. Her clothes were simple, her shoes were worn out. Her eyes looked tired, like someone who had cried many times. She walked past big shops and shining cafes. No one looked at her. No one smiled. No one cared. Then she stopped. In front of her was a fancy restaurant. It had golden lights, clean glass doors, and a red carpet at the front. Inside, people were eating and laughing. Waiters walked fast, holding plates and glasses. Music played softly in the background. Mrs. Layla looked at the restaurant. Then she slowly pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room suddenly felt quiet. All eyes turned to her. A woman in rich clothes whispered to her friend, who let her in. The restaurant manager saw her and frowned. He walked quickly to a young waiter and said, "Go tell that woman to leave. She doesn't belong here." The waiter nodded and walked over to Mrs. Layla. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice cold. "You can't sit here. This is not a place for people like you." Mrs. Layla looked up confused. "I just want to sit for a moment. I'm tired," she said softly. The waiter rolled his eyes. "You're not a customer. Please leave." "I'm not here to ask for food," she whispered. "I'm waiting for someone." But the waiter didn't care. He waved his hand and said loudly, "You need to leave now." People stared. Someone laughed. A child pointed and said, "Why? Is she so dirty?" Mrs. Layla felt her face turn red. She stood up slowly. Her knees shook. Her bag slipped from her shoulder and fell to the floor. Some papers and a small photograph fell out. The waiter stepped back, annoyed, making a mess. Mrs. Layla bent down, picked up the photo, and held it close. It was a picture of a young man in an army uniform. Her hands shook as she placed the photo back in her bag. "I'll leave," she said softly. "No need to shout." She walked to the door slowly. No one helped. No one stopped her. The waiter returned to the manager and said, "She's gone." The manager smiled. "Good. People like her don't belong in places like this." Outside, Mrs. Layla sat on a small bench near the sidewalk. She looked at the sky. Tears ran down her face. She opened her bag again and pulled out the photo. The young man in the photo was smiling. He wore medals on his chest. She touched his face with her fingers. "My son," she whispered, "you told me to stay strong. But it's so hard." People walked past her. Some looked at her and turned away. One man dropped a coin at her feet, thinking she was begging. She didn't touch the coin. She kept looking at the photo. "You said you'd come today," she whispered. "You said to meet you here. I believed you." She closed her eyes. Inside the restaurant, the waiter laughed with another server. "Did you see her face when I shouted at her?" he said. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. They laughed again. But one boy, the dishwasher, stood near the kitchen and watched them. His name was Arman. He was only 17. He had seen everything. He didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He thought about the old woman's eyes. They weren't the eyes of a beggar. They were the eyes of a mother, waiting for someone. Back on the bench, Mrs. Layla looked at her watch. It was almost 3 p.m. She clutched her bag tightly. She fixed her scarf and stood up again. She looked at the restaurant. Should she go back? Should she wait longer? But then she stopped. A black car came and parked across the street. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a formal black coat. He looked around. He was searching for someone. Then he saw her. His face changed. He walked fast toward her. "Amy," he said. Mrs. Layla looked up and her eyes filled with tears. He hugged her tightly. People nearby stopped and stared. Someone whispered, "Wait, is that the army officer from TV?" Another replied, "I think that's Captain Zane, the hero who saved those soldiers last year." Inside the restaurant, the waiter looked out the window. His mouth fell open. The man outside was shaking hands, with Mrs. Layla hugging her like she was a queen. The waiter ran to the manager. "Sir, that woman we kicked out," she's the manager, stood up. "What now?" "Sir, her son is someone important. Very important." Outside, Captain Zane held his mother's hand and said, "I'm sorry I'm late. I came as fast as I could." Mrs. Layla smiled with tears in her eyes. "I thought maybe you forgot." Zane shook his head. "I would never forget you, Amy. Never." Then he looked at the restaurant. His eyes turned serious. "Did someone here speak badly to you?" She stayed silent, but Zane had already understood. He turned toward the door, walked straight to the entrance. People stepped aside. The waiter's face turned pale. Captain Zane walked in, straight-backed, strong, proud, with his mother right behind him. The restaurant was silent. Zane looked around and said, "I'm here to speak to the man who kicked out my mother." The restaurant was quiet. No one spoke. All eyes were on Captain Zane, the army officer in full uniform, strong, confident, serious, and next to him stood his mother, Mrs. Layla, the same woman who had been shouted at and kicked out just moments ago. The manager stepped forward. "Nervous, sir? Welcome. We didn't know." Zane raised his hand. "Where is the waiter who insulted my mother?" The waiter slowly came out from behind the counter. He looked scared. Zane stared at him. "You kicked her out. Didn't even ask her name. You judged her by her clothes, by her face." The waiter looked down. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know." Zane's voice was calm but firm. "You didn't care to know." Mrs. Layla touched her son's arm. "Beta, leave it. Let's not create drama." Zane looked at her with respect. "You always forgive people too, silly Amy." She smiled softly, but there was sadness in her eyes. The people in the restaurant were confused. Who was this woman? Why did a hero like Zane treat her like a queen? What was her story? They sat down at a corner table. For the first time, someone pulled the chair out for Mrs. Layla. For the first time, the staff poured her water. The same place she was insulted. Now she was honored. Zane looked at her and said, "Tell me everything. I want people to hear your story." Mrs. Layla looked around. Then she nodded. She began to speak. "I was only 19 when I got married," she said. "My husband was a kind man. We were poor, but we were happy." She paused, remembering. "Then one day he died in a road accident. I was pregnant with Zane. I had nothing. No money, no family to help." People listened quietly. The rich women who once laughed now looked guilty. The men who once ignored her now stared with respect. "I started cleaning houses, washing clothes, making food in other people's kitchens. I worked day and night. I never complained. My only goal was Zane." Zane held his mother's hand tightly. She continued. "When he was little, he used to wear broken shoes. We had no proper home. But I always told him, 'Son, don't cry. One day you'll wear a uniform and make me proud.'" A few staff members wiped their eyes. Mrs. Layla looked at Zane, and he did. He worked hard, studied under the streetlight, and got a scholarship. Then he joined the army. She turned to the people sitting round. "But he asked me for one thing," said Amy. "Don't tell anyone about me. I want to succeed without using my name, so I stayed silent." "For years?" Zane nodded. "I didn't want people to respect me because of sympathy. I wanted to earn it." The waiter, who once shouted at her, now had tears in his eyes. He stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm truly sorry. I judged you. I was wrong." Mrs. Layla looked at him. She didn't smile. But she didn't shout either. She just said softly, "You didn't see a mother. You only saw poor clothes." Zane stood up. "I don't want punishment for him," he said, "but I want everyone to remember what happened here." He looked around the room. "Today, it was my mother. Tomorrow it could be yours." A deep silence filled the restaurant. People lowered their heads. Outside, a small crowd had started gathering. News was spreading. "Captain Zane defends poor woman, turns out she's his mother." One journalist asked, "Captain Zane, how did you feel when you saw what they did to her?" Zane replied calmly, "That was not pain. That was shame. Not for her but for them." Another reporter asked Mrs. Layla, "Ma'am, how did you stay so strong for so many years?" She smiled gently. "Because a mother never gives up, even when the world does." As Zane and Mrs. Layla left the restaurant, the staff stood in a line, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. They clapped, not for a soldier, but for a mother who had sacrificed everything. And inside the kitchen, young Armand the dishwasher whispered to himself, "I knew there was something special about her." The restaurant was still quiet. Captain Zane and Mrs. Layla had just left. But the memory of what happened was still fresh. Everyone was thinking the same thing. How could they treat someone's mother like that? Inside the kitchen, the waiter alone. He stared at the floor. His hands were shaking. He remembered every word he had said to her. "This is not a place for people like you. Go away, ma'am. We don't serve beggars." Those words now felt like poison in his mouth. But instead of feeling sorry, Samir was angry, not at himself but at everyone else. He walked to the break area and saw the other staff. Some were talking quietly, some were still shocked. Samir laughed bitterly. "Oh please," he said. "All of you are acting like saints now." The others looked at him. "One," said Samir. "What you did was wrong. Just say sorry and mean it." Samir rolled his eyes. "I already said sorry. What more do they want? A medal?" Young Armand, the dishwasher, was sitting in the corner. He stood up and walked toward Samir. "You didn't say sorry because you felt bad," Armand said. "You said it because you got caught." Samir turned to him. "And who are you to lecture me?" "Just a cleaner." Armand didn't back down. "At least I never insulted someone's mother." The room went silent. Samir's face turned red with anger. "Enough," he shouted. "She looked like a beggar. How was I supposed to know she was someone important?" Armand replied calmly, "You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect." The manager entered and heard the last line. He looked at Samir. "Armand is right," the manager said. "We made a big mistake today. And you were the one who shouted at her." Samir crossed his arms. "So what now? You'll fire me?" The manager didn't answer. He just looked disappointed. Later that evening, some customers returned. They weren't there for food. They wanted to see the place where the army hero had stood. Many people came and asked questions. Is it true his mother was kicked out? Who was the waiter who shouted at her? Samir felt small. Everyone knew now. The restaurant owner called for an emergency meeting. The staff stood in a line. As the owner spoke, "I saw the news. The whole city saw it," he said. "Our restaurant is in headlines for the wrong reason." He turned to Samir. "You are the face of that mistake." Samir finally looked down. He had no words left. Meanwhile, Armin was washing dishes. He had never spoken much before, but today he felt something inside him. Courage. The courage to speak for what's right. Samir walked to Arman. Look, he said, I don't like you, but maybe you're right. Arman didn't smile. He simply replied, it's not about liking or disliking. It's about learning. That night, Samir couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Mrs. Layla's face in his mind. The way she held her bag. The way she looked hurt but never angry. He remembered how she picked up her photo from the floor. Silently. In the morning, he made a decision. He would go and find her. Not to fix his image, but to fix his heart. Back in a small, quiet house in the old part of the city, Mrs. Layla was making tea. She still wore simple clothes, still lived a simple life. But now, the whole city knew her strength. She had no idea that Samir was standing outside her door, holding a letter in his hand, and shaking with guilt. It was early morning. Birds were singing. The sky was soft and blue. Mrs. Layla stood in her small kitchen, pouring tea into 2 cups. The house was simple. 1 table, 2 chairs, old curtains, but everything was clean. She looked peaceful suddenly. There was a knock at the door. Knock, knock, knock. Mrs. Layla paused. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door slowly. Outside stood some waiter who had shouted at her. His head was down. He was holding a piece of paper. For a moment there was silence. Then Samir said softly, Ma'am, may I come in for just 5 minutes? Mrs. Layla looked at him quietly. Then she nodded and moved aside. He stepped inside nervously. He sat on the edge of the chair. He didn't touch the tea. I came here, he began, because I can't sleep. Mrs. Layla said nothing. Samir placed the paper on the table. It was a letter written by hand. I wrote this for you, he said. I know sorry is not enough, but I still needed to say it. Mrs. Layla picked up the letter. She read it slowly. Each line was simple but full of truth. I judged you by your clothes. I treated you like nothing. But now I know you are stronger than all of us. You raised a hero, and I couldn't even respect a mother. She looked at Samir. His eyes were red. He wasn't acting. He was really sorry. Then she spoke, gently, Beta, people make mistakes. What matters is if they change. Samir looked up. I want to change, he said, but I don't know how. She smiled. Start by seeing people with your heart, not your eyes. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Captain Zane was in his army office. He was going through files and reports. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was Arman, the young dishwasher. Sir, I know I shouldn't call you, but something strange happened. Zane replied calmly. It's okay, speak. Arman took a deep breath. Samir, the waiter? He disappeared. He didn't come to work today. Zane raised an eyebrow. Where did he go? I don't know, sir, Arman said. But he was asking about your mother's address yesterday. Zane stood up, his face turned serious. Back at Mrs. Layla's house, Samir finished his tea. He stood up to leave. I'll go now, he said. But before he reached the door, there was another knock. Knock, knock, knock. This time it was Captain Zayn. He walked in, eyes sharp, full of worry. Emmy, are you okay? He asked quickly. Mrs. Layla smiled. I'm fine. Look who's here. Zane looked at Samir. Their eyes met. Samir stood up, afraid. I didn't come to hurt her, he said quickly. I just wanted to say sorry. Zane didn't speak. He stepped closer. Samir added, I was wrong. I came to admit that. There was a long pause. Then Captain Zane surprised everyone. He placed his hand on Samir's shoulder. Then prove you've changed, he said. Help someone who has no voice. Samir nodded. As Samir left the house, he looked different. Not proud. Not ashamed. Just human. A man who had learned something important. Later that evening, Zane and his mother sat together. He asked, Why did you let him in? She smiled. Because once, someone gave me a chance to. Zane looked at her with admiration. You're stronger than me, Amy. She touched his head gently. No, Beta. I just never stopped believing in people. But outside, in a black car, someone was watching the house. A man with dark glasses and a sharp face. He spoke into a small radio. They're both here, he said. The voice on the other end replied. Good. Now wait for my signal. The night was dark. Streetlights flickered. The road was empty. Outside Mrs. Layla's small home, a black car stood parked. Inside, a man in black glasses was watching the house silently. He had a sharp face, a small scar near his eye, and he held a walkie-talkie in his hand. The voice from the other end spoke again. Are they still inside? The man replied softly, Yes, the mother and the captain. They haven't left. Then he put the radio down and stared harder. But why was he watching them? Inside the house, Mrs. Layla was preparing dinner. Zane sat beside her, smiling. You still cook the best doll in the world, Amy. She laughed. That's because you still eat like a little boy. They both smiled. Unaware of the danger outside, suddenly, there was a knock. Knock. Zane stood up quickly. He walked to the door and opened it slightly. A man stood there, tall, dressed like a delivery boy. He held a box. Package from Mrs. Layla, he said. Zane frowned. We didn't order anything. The man smiled. It's a gift. Someone sent it. Zane took the box, but something felt wrong. He closed the door and looked at the label. There was no name, no address, only one word written. Forgiveness. Zane opened the box slowly. Inside, there was an old photo. It showed 3 people. A young Mrs. Layla, a man in army uniform, and a small child. Zane stared at it. My father, he whispered. Mrs. Layla turned pale. She grabbed the photo. Where did this come from? She asked, shaking. Zane looked at her. You never told me you had this photo. I didn't, she said. It was lost. Years ago. Zane's mind raced. Someone's playing a game, he said. Someone who knows our past. He ran to the window and looked outside. The black car was gone, but something was left behind. A small piece of paper on the gate. Zane walked out, picked it up, and read it. There were only 6 words. You forgot him, but he remembers. He froze. Who is this about? He asked his mother. Mrs. Layla looked down. Her hands trembled. I don't know, but her eyes said otherwise. Zane didn't press her, but deep inside, he felt it. His mother was hiding something painful, something connected to his father. Meanwhile, across the city, Samir the waiter was walking home. He had just donated money to a local food shelter. He felt better than he had in days. Suddenly, a motorcycle stopped near him. A man handed him a note. Samir opened it. You defended her. Now they'll come for you too. Samir looked around, but the motorcycle was gone. He felt a chill run down his spine. Back in the army base, Zane sat alone in his office. He placed the old photo on his desk. He stared at his father's face. Who are you warning us about? He whispered. Just then, a soldier entered. Sir, someone requested to meet you. He says he knows your family. Zane stood up. Bring him in. The door opened, and the man from the black car walked in. Zane's eyes narrowed. Who are you? The man smiled. My name is Colonel Farid. I served with your father. Zane was silent. The man stepped closer and said, There are things you don't know, Captain. About your mother, about your father, and about the man who never forgave her. Zane stood up. What do you mean? Colonel Farid took out an envelope and placed it on the desk. Read this, and protect your mother, because someone is coming. And he's not here for peace. Zane grabbed the envelope and opened it. His eyes widened. A single name was written inside. Majid? Zane looked up. Who is Majid? Colonel Farid whispered, Your uncle, your father's younger brother. And he believes your mother destroyed his life. Captain Zane sat frozen in his army office. The name in the envelope repeated in his head. Majid, his father's younger brother. His uncle? And he had never heard about him. Not even once. He looked at Colonel Farid with serious eyes. Why didn't my mother tell me about him? Colonel Farid sighed. Because the story is not simple. Captain, it's filled with pain, jealousy, and betrayal. Zane stayed quiet. Continued. Majid was once close to your father, but everything changed after your father married Layla. Zane clenched his fists. Changed how? Colonel Farid looked out the window. Majid loved Layla too. Zane's heart sank. Farid went on. He thought your father stole her from him. He never accepted their marriage. He believed your mother chose status over love. Zane was shocked. My mother never said a word about this. Farid nodded. She wanted to protect you from the past, but now, the past is coming back. Meanwhile, at home, Mrs. Layla stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes. Her hands were shaking. Her thoughts were lost in the past. She remembered a younger Majid, kind, smart, but proud. She remembered the day she told him she was marrying his brother. His face had changed. Cold, dark, tears filled her eyes as she whispered, I never meant to hurt him, but I had to follow my heart. Suddenly, her phone rang. She picked it up. It was an unknown number. Hello, she said. A deep voice replied, Did you miss me, Bobby? Mrs. Layla froze. It was Majid. Majid, where are you? She asked. His voice was bitter. Closer than you think. Did you like the photo I sent? Layla's heart pounded. What do you want? Majid laughed quietly. Justice. After all these years, I finally want justice. Before she could answer, the line disconnected. Back in the army office, Zane was still with Farid. His phone buzzed. A text message. No name, no number, just one line. She's hiding the full story. Ask her what happened on the last night your father was alive. Zane stood up. I have to go. Farid grabbed his arm. Be careful. Majid doesn't just want revenge. He wants to destroy her name. Zane rushed home. He found his mother sitting quietly on the sofa, still holding the phone. Amy, he said gently, tell me everything. She looked into his eyes. I was hoping this day would never come. Zane sat beside her. No more secrets? She took a deep breath and began. Your father and Majid grew up close, like twins. But everything changed when I entered their lives. Majid believed I belonged to him, but I loved your father. He couldn't accept it even on our wedding day. He didn't come. After you were born, he disappeared. But one night, many years later, your father received a letter. Zane leaned in. What was in the letter? Mrs. Layla's voice cracked. It was from Majid. He said he would take revenge, that he would destroy us both. Your father went to meet him that night, and never came back. Zane's face turned. Pale, you mean? Baba's accident. Mrs. Layla nodded slowly. I don't know what happened that night, but your father was found dead the next morning. The police called it an accident. Zane stood up, fists clenched. But you think Majid was behind it? Tears rolled down her face. I don't know. Beta. I was scared. I had a child to raise. I stayed quiet. Suddenly a sound came from outside. A car engine. Zayn ran to the window. The black car was back. It stopped in front of the house. And this time the door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, dark clothes, black sunglasses, and a cold expression. It was Majid. He had returned. Mrs. Layla stood at the window. Her eyes widened. "It's him," she whispered. "After all these years." Zayn looked at her. "This time, Ammi, I'll protect you." Outside, Majid looked up at the house. He whispered to himself, "Let's see if truth or lies will win this time." The air was still. The black car sat outside the house like a silent shadow. Zayn stood at the door, watching the man in sunglasses walk closer. His mother, Mrs. Layla, stood behind him, quiet but trembling. Zayn stepped outside first. He looked straight at the man. "You must be Majid," he said calmly. The man took off his sunglasses. His eyes were sharp, cold. "And you must be Zayn." "My nephew," he replied with a small smile. Mrs. Layla stepped forward. Her voice was low. "Majid, why are you here after all these years?" Majid's smile disappeared. "I came to finish what never ended." They invited him inside. He sat down in the same chair where Samir had once apologized, but this time, the air felt different. Heavy Zain crossed his arms. "You sent the letter. You sent the photo. You've been watching us." Majid nodded slowly. "I waited a long time for this moment." Mrs. Layla looked into his eyes. "What do you want, Majid?" Majid replied without blinking. "The truth, for the world to know what really happened the night my brother died." Zayn sat up straight. "What do you mean?" Majid leaned forward. "You think it was an accident?" "No, Captain. Your father didn't die by chance. He died because he was betrayed." Mrs. Layla gasped. "What are you saying?" Majid looked at her with anger in his eyes. "You sent him that night. You pushed him to meet me, and then he never came back." She shook her head. "No, he went on his own. I begged him not to." Majid stood up, voice louder now. "You turned him against me. You took him from me, and then you took my place in the family. You made me a stranger." Zayn stepped between them. "That's enough." Majid turned to him. "I don't hate you, Zayn. You're just a soldier in the middle of this war." Zayn asked. "Then why come now?" "After all this time," Majid's face turned dark. "Because now I have proof. I have your father's last letter, and it tells a different story." He pulled out a crumpled old paper from his coat. He placed it on the table. Zayn picked it up and read aloud. "Majid, if something happens to me tonight, know that I never stopped loving you like a brother. But if you're behind this, my son will find the truth." Zayn looked at Majid. "So what truth are you talking about?" Majid whispered, "The truth that your mother was once offered a deal to save her family by betraying your father." Mrs. Layla shook her head in tears. "It's not true. That deal was a lie. I never accepted it." Zayn felt torn. He looked at his mother, then at his uncle. Two people, two stories, one broken past. He stood up. "Enough. We don't need fights. We need answers." He walked to the drawer and pulled out an old box. Inside was a USB drive. "This was found among Baba's army things. I never opened it." He plugged it into the laptop. A video began to play. It was a recording. His father, speaking to the camera. Zayn and Mrs. Layla leaned in. "If you're watching this, it means I didn't return. I had to meet Majid, to end the bitterness. But if Majid harms me, please forgive him, and protect my wife. She was never part of this fight." The video ended. Silence filled the room. Majid sat down slowly. His eyes filled with tears. He whispered, "All this time, I thought you betrayed me. But he still loved us both." Mrs. Layla placed her hand on his shoulder. "I never hated you, Majid. I was just trying to survive." Majid looked down, thought his voice cracked. "I wasted so many years in anger." Zayn said gently, "It's not too late to fix things. But you have to let go of the hate." Majid wiped his tears. "I don't know how." Double quotes. Mrs. Layla replied softly. "Start by staying. Eat with us tonight, like old times." For the first time in years. Majid smiled, a broken smile, but a real one. Outside the window, the night looked different, not darker, but calmer, as if the past was slowly healing. But across the street in another car, someone else was watching. Samir, he had come to say, sorry again. But when he saw Majid inside the house, he whispered to himself, "So, this isn't over yet." The night was quiet again. Inside the house, Majid sat at the table. Mrs. Layla served dinner with shaking hands. Zayn watched them both, his heart full of questions. They were finally together. After years of pain, silence, and blame. But someone else had seen it all. Someone watching from a distance. Samir stood across the street in the dark. His eyes were wide. "That's the man from the photo. The one who sent the letter to the restaurant," he whispered. He remembered the fear in Mrs. Layla's eyes. He remembered Zayn's strength, and now he wanted answers too. The next morning, Zayn went to the army base. He entered his office. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Samir. "Captain, I know who left the note at your gate. I saw him that night." Zayn called him immediately. "Samir, what did you see?" Samir spoke fast. "A man in black? He had army boots. He dropped a note on your gate and left in a black car." Zayn's eyes narrowed. It was Majid, but why? Back at the house, Majid stood in the backyard, holding something in his hand. It was a small key, the same key from the night his brother died. He looked at it and said to himself, One last truth, before I leave. He entered the house and found Mrs. Layla sitting alone. I need to show you something, he said quietly. He took her to the old army trunk in the storage room, with shaking hands. He opened it. Inside was a hidden box, locked for over 20 years. He used the key. It clicked open. Inside were letters, old army reports. One sealed envelope. Majid handed it to her. This letter was from your husband, but I never gave it to you. Mrs. Layla opened it slowly. The letter read, if Majid gives you this, it means he has forgiven. I want you to know he was not my enemy. He was my brother. I only feared the people around him, the ones who wanted to use him. Tears fell from Mrs. Layla's eyes. All these years, we blamed each other. Majid nodded. I let them use me. I let hate win, but your love, your strength, it brought me back. At the same time, Zain was meeting a senior officer at the army base. Sir, he said, I need files from the night my father died. The officer looked surprised. Captain, no one asked about that in years. Why now? Zain replied, because my family needs the truth. They gave him the file. Inside were old reports, witness statements, photos, and one shocking detail. A man named Colonel Hafiz was seen near the accident. He was dismissed quietly after that. Zain's eyes widened. Colonel Hafiz was the same man who had trained Majid years ago. Zain rushed home. He gathered everyone, his mother, Majid, and even Salmir. He placed the file on the table. Baba didn't die because of Majid, he said. He died because someone else wanted to end their bond. He turned to Majid. Do you remember Hafiz? Majid's face changed. Yes. He hated my brother's rise. He wanted control. He used my pain to turn me against him. Zain nodded. Was seen at the accident site. It wasn't just a car crash. It was a plan. Mrs. Layla whispered, all these years, we were all victims. Zain held her hand. Not anymore. He looked at Majid. Will you help me reopen the case and clear Baba's name? Majid stood tall. With my life. A few weeks later, the army reopened the case. With Zain and Majid's help, Colonel Hafiz was exposed. He had used Majid's pain to break the family apart. But now, truth had won. The story reached the media. People praised Zain's courage, Mrs. Layla's strength, and even Majid's change of heart. Samir's restaurant story also went viral again, this time with truth, not hate. He gave a small speech. Sometimes the people we judge are carrying more pain than we can ever imagine. All they need is kindness. That night, the family sat together for dinner again, but this time, they were not broken. They were healing. Zain looked around, the table. Ammi. Samir. Majid. Smiles. Peace. For the first time in years,